After being a low end 5 star that not even the blue blood coaches around the nation really wanted, at 6'1", Trae Young has grown to the point where he now is top 2 in the NBA in averaging points and assists at only 21 years old. And with this young core around him, he looks like he may be the best. He may be the best player, most dominant player on a very dominating Eastern Conference team for a very, very long time. How you guys doing? It is Saturday, May 30th, 2020 in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, an Atlanta fan, I must say, before I get into this. So, of course, some of the things I may say may come off as a little biased, but I'm going to try as hard as I possibly can to be completely kind of fair and equal when kind of rating how great of a player Trae Young can become. And before I go into Trae Young, I will mention that he is statistically the league's worst NBA defender. And of course, I think he'll get better with that. But at the end of the day, we never know. Because I mean, after these first 2 years, he's still incredibly small, and he plays too many minutes and gets scored on too much by players that are more than half a foot taller than he is. So I'm just gonna start off with that disclaimer. And now that that's out the way, let me just give you a little background on just the legacy of Trae Young. So, I mean, he grew up in Norman, Oklahoma, of course, with his dad. He was kind of well connected with a lot of NBA players, kind of just growing up in that area. You can see a lot of the pictures that he had with NBA greats because he was just like not in the same circles, but he was around kind of the same people. And I think that really had an impact into how good of a player he was going to be. He's incredibly small, and I think he's in my high school grade. Like we're in the same grade. We were in the same grade. So of course, like we grew up watching like Steve Nash, and of course that was a player who we tended to model his game after. So when he gets to Oklahoma, he would go on to lead all Power Five players as a freshman, as a 6'1" freshman. He would lead all Power Five players in points and assists, a feat that no other college basketball player has ever done, let alone a freshman. And the second player to ever do that was John Moran, who did it as a sophomore at Murray State, which is an Ohio Valley Conference team, or an Ohio Valley Conference program, as opposed to Trae Young, who played in Oklahoma, where he was the only really good player. And it was always kind of a tough situation because they always knew that he would be the best player that they would have to guard at all times on the floor. And he would still go out and average 25 points, 9 assists a game to help Oklahoma get to one of the last spots in the tournament where he would lose in the first round. That is Trae Young's college legacy. He would go on to be he would go on to be a first team All-American. Of course, he'd go on to be a Big 12 All-Freshman, Big 12 Rookie of the Year, and he'd make the All Big 12 team. Wasn't the Player of the Year though, but that's a whole other thing. But that's his legacy in the 1 year that he played. He didn't win a lot of games, but he definitely did the best of what he could. And following that, going into the draft, he was seen as someone who would fall towards the end of the lottery because he was so small and he was so bad defensively, and people didn't think that his deep three-point shooting and his passing would translate to the NBA, where there's a much faster pace, where all the NBA players aren't like college scrubs. No offense to D1 college basketball players that can definitely destroy me in basketball, but of course, there's a different level between college basketball players and NBA level players. So, I mean, people were struggling to see how a player this small, who no one's really believed in, who hasn't really won that many games, could come to the NBA and really make an impact. He would go on and get drafted 5th overall by the Dallas Mavericks, but in a trade with Atlanta, he was traded along with the pick that was Cam Reddish. He was traded to the Atlanta Hawks, and he became kind of the center of their rebuild under new GM Travis Schlenk. Of course, when he got there, John Collins was entering his second year. Kevin Huerter was also a rookie, and he had to play with a combination of really, really old veterans, bad contracts that the Hawks were trying to get rid of, and just young players that the Hawks were kind of banking and investing their entire future into. And he's one of those players, because he was small and because the NBA was just it was hard to really adjust to. I mean, it took him a second, of course. He was struggling at the beginning. He wasn't making his shots. And like it was a very, very tough time for him. But eventually, as he started playing more reps and got to see other teams more and see other point guards that he was playing against against them more, he started to get better. He started to get more used to it. And once Jeremy Lin was traded to the Toronto Raptors at the trade deadline, which was after the All-Star break, Trae Young starts going insane. And for the second half of the season, he would average 23.5 points and like 9 assists. And even though the Hawks wouldn't go on to make the playoffs, they would go on to win a lottery pick. Trae Young that season would go on to average 19 points, 8 assists, and 4 rebounds for the entire season, shooting 42% from the field, 32% from three, and he would go on to shoot 83% from the foul line. So, I mean, that's what Trae was doing in his first year. He would finish runner-up in the Rookie of the Year race to Luka, only getting 2 or 3 first-place votes out of a lot more. So that was kind of what he was. He was an amazing he had an amazing second half to his rookie year, but it wasn't enough to catch what Luka Doncic was doing at a legendary level and as early as he was. And Luka Doncic is almost a full year younger than Trae Young. So I mean, there was always that advantage as well. But Trae Young was definitely proving himself as one of the league's best players. But just like a lot of the other young players in these leagues, the true mark of becoming a legendary player is how well or how big can your jump be in your second year. I already went over the jump from Luka as he jumped from 21-7-7 to about 29-9-9. That's the Luka situation. Trae Young would go on to jump from 19 points and 8 rebounds to 29.6 points, 9.3 assists, 4.3 rebounds, shooting 44% from the field, 36% from three, and 86% from the free throw line. I'm an Atlanta Hawks fan. I can give you every single highlight of what happened in Trae Young's second year, just filled with buzzer beater highlights, 40-point performances with 10 assists usually almost every time, 150-point performance against the Miami Heat, and just a half-court buzzer beater shot to end the first half of the All-Star game this year. In addition to Luka, he was voted, just like I said, he was voted to be a starter for the Eastern Conference in the All-Star game this past year. Even though it's the Eastern Conference, in his second year at 21 years old, Trae Young was voted over players like Jimmy Butler and Bradley Beal in the East who were having prime seasons and who were having elite seasons in the middle of their prime. They were outvoted. They were, as Trae Young, the 6'1" kid from Norman, Oklahoma, who 3 years prior couldn't even get a Kentucky or a Duke scholarship, would come to Atlanta, dominate there even though their team was incredibly young. And of course he made the step the next year to average almost 30 points and 10 assists as a 21-year-old 6-foot player. And I mean, additionally, if we're just looking at his team, at the beginning of the season, they had a lot of players that they were going to get rid of in free agency. Jeremy Lin, Jabari Parker. And, of course, they were moving a lot of those around to get a lot of picks. And in the second year, the Hawks were able to draft DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish in the lottery. They were able to pick Bruno Fernando up also, who also became a great young player in this organization. Clint Capella was signed right before the quarantine happened, before the season got a chance to end. So now if we're looking at Trae Young's cast of characters at the end of the season compared to the beginning of the season or even in his freshman year or in his rookie season, I think that this upcoming team this next year will be a lot more formidable. And because they're all incredibly young, Clint Capella being the oldest of the players that I mentioned being 25, John Collins being the second oldest at 23, and then you have players like Trae Young, Kevin Huerter, Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter, Bruno Fernando, kind of filling in where they see fit. This Atlanta Hawks organization looks like once it takes off, it's not really going to come back to the ground. Last year, the only thing keeping the Hawks back from being a better team was, one, they were moving a lot of their players around and some of their young players were getting a lot more experience. But John Collins, their second main player, or their number 2, happened to be suspended with a human growth hormone issue. I'm not going to get into that one. But with all that, considering what he's done in the season that he's had, with the players that were available to him on the court on those various dates that he was playing, I'm very impressed with what Trae Young is doing. And I look past his record and see what he's doing as a 6'1" point guard by himself. And of course, like I said, he's a very bad defender, a historically horrendous defender. But on offense, this dude at 21 creates more offense than all but I would say maybe 10 players in basketball. At 21 years old, that's an incredible feat considering a lot of NBA players' peaks are around their age 28 season. That's 7 years out for Trae Young. But that's kind of where I go there. If I were to give him a historical comp, I'd say he's a little bit of a Steph Curry, Steve Nash hybrid, but he also has Chris Paul's handling. So it's kind of like that, and that's all on offense. Eventually, I think it could be a competent defender like Steph Curry, where he'd be like a sort of a side defender that plays off the ball, but you can count on him to get at least like little bitty steals here and there, and he could become at least a net zero defender and then still be an amazing offensive player and become one of the league's best. I think he's another player whose future is his future is or his potential is really kind of limitless. Him alongside Luka Doncic, I think that their arcs may be very similar because even though Luka Doncic is the better individual talent, I think Trae Young's core is a lot more built to last. It's better built to last longer. Is better built to at least bring a championship to Atlanta as compared to the Mavericks, who are a little bit older, but their ceilings aren't as high as the young players on the Atlanta Hawks core. And really, with all that, I mean, with Trae Young, with what we've seen in his second year from a jump to his first of his second, it's very, very possible that we can see season MVPs, finals MVPs, all that really come through in his career, as we've seen players like Steve Nash and Steph Curry get MVPs on their teams for leading, for being the lead point guard on an amazingly talented offense, a high-scoring offense that can bring them the amount of production that they've been able to that they can achieve. And even though I'm speaking hypotheticals, and of course none of it has happened yet, the Hawks are a team I think I would watch every single game this year. If I wasn't a Hawks fan, I wouldn't watch them every single game, but I'd watch them a lot. This Hawks team looks like it's going to be a league pass favorite with Trae Young, John Collins, and Cam Reddish hopefully playing the full season, and Kevin Huerter, all these other players kind of filling in around that, and Clint Capella, Bruno Fernando, DeAndre Hunter, and all that. So I'm not necessarily saying that Trae Young might be the most elite player of his era just based off his individual performance, but I am saying the way the Atlanta Hawks are built for the future and knowing how and understanding how Trae Young plays the game, I think Travis Schlenk has built this team around Trae Young almost perfectly so that they are definitely built to compete deep into the Eastern Conference playoffs without Trae Young having to really put too much into the performance. So that's what I think really about Trae Young. I think he's a very underrated player. He's been underrated his whole career just because he was small. And time again, he's proven every single critic wrong. His defense is probably never going to be elite. He's never going to be an all-star defender. But if we look at what he does for this offense, and if this Atlanta offense builds around him the way I see it building, the Hawks are going to be almost a dynasty coming up. It might come to the proportions of the Golden State Warriors. I think at the worst, it looks like the Suns of the last decade. At the best, or of the 2000s, of the mid 2000s, and at the best, I think they look like the Warriors in the 2010s. They have the salary cap space to sign a player like Brandon Ingram alongside their other young players. I mean, the potential with this Hawks team is astronomical considering what Travis Schlenk has done as a GM. But if we're looking at the individual player, I think he by himself is a Hall of Fame level player. Might be first ballot, might even be unanimous. At 21 years old, seeing what he's done, Trae Young is a player that if you don't watch him enough now, if you start watching him now, you will not regret it. Even though he's an Atlanta Hawks player, that's probably exactly why, but he's my favorite player to watch in the NBA that isn't LeBron James or Giannis. He's just a walking highlight waiting to happen, and you never know when he can erupt for 40 because it happens more often than you'd think. Like I said, just based off how small he is, I think that also adds into how amazing he is. I think another comp, probably a better comp, would be for how big his peak might be. I think he might be a mix. I think he's a Steve Nash, Allen Iverson hybrid with Steph Curry shooting. I think he's a Steph Curry, Allen Iverson combo. That's probably better, but he still averages 9 assists. And starting next season, he might average he might never average below double digit assists in a season ever again. He's a player I can definitely see with all-time assist marks, all-time scoring marks, and he'll score and assist in a way that we really haven't seen in this league. I think he'll be responsible for the most points in the 2020s. And we're talking about this upcoming decade and how young he is and how he's going to dominate it. At the end of the next decade, he'll only be 32 years old. So, like, even for the next decade of just watching basketball, just keep an eye on Trae Young. I promise you will not be disappointed. And with that, I really appreciate you for sitting with me through 15 minutes. That's a long time. You can always just skip through, get a chance to listen to my other ones. I think the more videos that I do, I become more comfortable in saying what I need to say, so they're a little bit longer. So if I feel like if I disrespected other players on this list, it's because I'm just kind of I have more things to say with each player I get to, and of course I'm doing these every year. So I kind of want to see how these players progress over these seasons and see how they get better and just follow an elite career from the beginning to the end. Thanks once again. I'm James Sims. And with that, I'm just going to say peace.